On November 6, 1867, Canada's first Parliament met here in the House of Commons. This is what Centre Block looked like in those early days of Confederation. Back then, Ottawa was perhaps not the most sophisticated of places. Many had been surprised a decade earlier when Queen Victoria named it the capital. Canada's first Governor-General, Lord Monck, remarked that the place could never amount to much. Lady Monk's criticism was harsher, writing in her diary that they were much disgusted by the squalid look of Ottawa. I went on wondering how we could ever live there. Despite this apparent lack of enthusiasm for the new capital, planning and construction of the Parliament buildings began. Johanna Mizgala is the House of Commons curator. She knows more about the history of this building than just about anyone.
To understand the building on Parliament Hill and its context for the renovation and restoration plan, we really have to go back in time and consider the original building, which sat on Parliament Hill and was designed by Thomas Fuller and Chilean Jones. So that building was a neo-Gothic building, and the building that we know today shares some similarities in terms of its exterior, but it's a very different and truly 20th century building.
Centre Block officially opened in June 1866, but the Parliament buildings were not yet complete. And a year later, on July 1st, 1867, the Dominion of Canada was born. Along with it came an enhanced sense of pride towards Ottawa, its reputation as a muddy shantytown fading fast. The young capital was growing and transforming. Ornate, decorative, and innovative, many regarded this group of buildings as some of the finest examples of Gothic Revival architecture in the world.
So that building was on the site for about 50 years. And then on the 3rd of February, 1916, there was a fire that broke out and essentially destroyed the building. Two architects were commissioned to do a study to see if they could actually rebuild on the site. So Toronto architect John Pearson and an architect from Montreal, Joseph Omer Marchand, were brought together. They had never met before this project, and the task at hand for them was to create this sort of proposal as to what could be done. Now, they really seized the opportunity to take into consideration that Canada had changed considerably from 1867 to 1916, and that really what was needed here was a building for the 20th century, and a building that would last for the next generations and the Canada that was to come.
With only the library still standing, Pearson and Marchand proposed a brand new structure. Their design was a neo-Gothic exterior with a distinctly modern interior.
They took into account the original structure from the exterior, so it looked very much like what had been there originally, but very much a Beaux-Arts 20th century building inside. So they wanted the architecture to speak to the people who would have to use this building, to tell them about the places that they come from, the people that they represent, and essentially the duty that they had to Canadians. They were chosen, they are elected to represent a much wider constituency than themselves, and they are brought together to make decisions about legislation which ultimately trickles back to those people.